Now it's time for the Brad LaFrette Show interview of the week.
The Brad LaFrette Show. I'm your host, Brad LaFrette, and my guest this week is a contributor to the TailgateSociety.com and is the co-host of the Old Man Strength podcast on the site. His name is Chris Shipley. Chris, thank you for making the time this evening.
Hey, thanks for inviting me on. I'm excited.
Well, let's dive into it. I love the name of the podcast. Where did you come up with the name?
Well, Tim Johnson, my co-host, when I came on with Tailgate, Tim reached out to me, wanted to know if I'd be interested in starting a podcast with him because he kind of liked some of my takes on Twitter and some of my ways that I express things or whatever. And we just kind of hit it off. And since we're the two older senior members of Tailgate Society, we just thought, what are we going to talk about? And I said, I kind of feel like we're the old men in the room where we just kind of yell at the cloud and we don't get half the stuff that half these guys are talking about in the Slack channel or whatever. And so we just kind of went with that. And it's really kind of turned more into us talking about being dads and being husbands and giving a little bit of advice, because as we like to joke around, certainly there's no lack of demographic like old white men. So we feel that that's underserved.
Would you say that was your driving force to start a podcast, was just your past experiences, not only as an Iowa State fan, but as experiences as a father, husband, and whatnot?
Yeah, I think my motivation has always been, especially for the last 4 years, has been to try to give back and help people. I had a bout of cancer 4 years ago, which I ended up talking about on the podcast. And it really kind of, I remember just thinking to God that I was going to make an effort to talk about my story, but also to do whatever I can to help people. And if that means talking people through certain struggles that I've had, or bringing some enjoyment to some people by my crazy life and Tim's crazy life. But yeah, it was a lot of just motivation of me just wanting to put myself out there and be vulnerable and see if I could have some fun. I kind of live my life in that I'm going to try new things. I don't want to live in fear. I'd never done any podcasting before, never did any kind of, it's always been a dream of mine to interact with some of my heroes and sports stars and things like that. And, whatever comes along our way is just icing on the cake, really.
Speaking of mental health and just the awareness that's been brought, it's kind of at the forefront, in many social aspects now. You recently had Sean Roberts of KXNO 1460 and 106.3 FM come on, and I didn't know Sean's story, and he kind of elaborated that on your podcast. I felt that was a very moving interview, and I as someone that listens to KXNO, I did a little internship at KXNO Clear Channel at one point in time. I really was moved by that conversation you had with Sean, because I was not aware of that. Can you elaborate on it?
Yeah, Sean was really great about coming on, first of all, as busy as he is. But I guess I had picked up a little bit on, I listened to his show pretty regularly in the morning, and I had picked up a little bit on some changes there at the beginning of the pandemic, and he had talked a little bit about doing some therapy and so on. And then I kind of know him off the air a little bit. We played golf a couple times, and I mean, not that, we're super good friends, but enough that I felt comfortable enough that, hey, if you come on, would you be okay with talking about it? And he certainly was. That was part of the forthright thing with him is he kind of knew too that he has a platform, and if he can talk about that and maybe help some people, which is what he talked about on the episode, then that was even better. For me, as it was what I like to call the dad of Twitter, I guess, or whatever, I found it really good for somebody his age to recognize that he had some struggles and to get that help. And a lot of kids these days don't do that, right? They think they can either tough it out or push through it or whatever. I mean, that's everybody's man's mentality, I think, sometimes. but it's okay to look at yourself and be vulnerable and go, I need help. And I found it commendable that he did that. And I kind of wanted to give him a platform to talk about why he did it. And I mean, he was great about it.
You've had some great guests in the past, some Cyclone legends like a Dan McCarty and a Marcus Pfizer. Do you, looking back at your time so far up until this point, do you have any favorite experiences with guests or a favorite guest that you've really enjoyed speaking with?
I guess I have quite a few of them. Our first guests were Brent Curvey and George Condon. And that was a pure, I'm going to send these guys a message. I'd interacted with George on Twitter quite a bit. And I knew that he had played football in the Walden years, and this was right after the Texas game. And for them to just take their time and to come on was really special. And I've went over and talked to Brent a couple times at his restaurant. But I think the biggest thing for me, the two biggest things for me were after we talked to Marcus, after we were off the air, he knew I was coming out to Vegas to go out. He enjoyed it so much. He was like, hey, listen, when you come out, here's my phone number. Give me a call. We'll go have dinner or whatever. And him and I have had a pretty good relationship, just talking back and forth, texting back and forth ever since then. Kept in touch. But Dan McCarty was probably the most special for me because he came on to coach there when I was in college, and I immediately recognized the difference in that program. But for him to be on the phone with me and to call me Chris like I was an equal, that was pretty surreal. I think at one point we got all done, and I said to Tim, I said, was that as crazy for you as it was for me? Because I'm completely blown away that I would ever in a million years be able to sit here and have a conversation with somebody that I looked up to as a younger man, and he talked to me like we were equals. Like, that was crazy.
I think taking a step back, I got into podcasting, failed many times, and it's just there's a lot of outside factors like me and my wife have two young kids, starting a family, being busy with our jobs. My wife is a professor and an ICU nurse, and our schedules are always varying. So there's a lot of factors that I feel like I'm finally finding my niche, because I love editing is something that I've really enjoyed on the audio side. And now I'm learning how to do the video part, and it's a process. It's just tinkering and taking the time. Taking a step back and you look at your podcasting experience up until this point, is there a part of the process that you really enjoy the most? Like, obviously I love having the conversations and learning new things, especially from my people, Cyclone Nation. I love hearing from other people that are trying to make it a niche. And so what part of the process do you really enjoy the most, maybe besides the conversation piece?
Sure. I think it's the creativity part of it. Like we had Heather Burnside and Sergeant Paul Parisic on a couple months ago. So I searched and searched. I thought, oh, it'd be so funny if I could find some kind of a clip somewhere, of an audio clip somewhere of somebody getting arrested or a funny thing or whatever. So then I think I found the clip of Eddie Murphy as Axel Foley getting thrown out the window, and then he got arrested, and and he's like, what do you arrest somebody for getting thrown out of a car? Fucking jaywalking, something like that. And so finding that and then sitting next to him and go, oh, we need to splice this in because it'll be funny, and then we'll catch up here. When we did Coach McCarty, because I had a past relationship with Brent Curvey and he had played for him, I had messaged Brent the day before and said, hey, would you mind if I, we hopped on a call and I recorded 3 or 4 minutes here of me asking you a couple questions about Coach so I could play it for him during the podcast and then get his reaction. So he did that, and that was a really cool, genuine moment, because you could kind of hear Coach McCarty kind of tear up a little bit when he listened to Brent speak so eloquently about him. So it's things like that where you just get to play around and try different stuff or whatever. Tim usually does the editing after the fact, but he's been so busy that I kind of took that on as well the last few episodes. So each episode I find myself getting more and more into the creative process. Oh, what can we do here? What's a question here that we could end every podcast with? This would be a good way to wrap that up. So like now we ask the question, what is your definition of success? And by that definition, who is the most successful person you know? And it's a final question to kind of give a lesson and then learn something about the person. So, we're moving on to now asking that at the end of every episode. So it starts to evolve and come up with a little better ideas. Some things don't work, some things do. But it's just fun to just try different things.
Is there a guy that loves Iowa State more than Dan McCarty?
Nope. No way. I couldn't imagine leaving a job and getting removed from a job and 20 years later still having the love for that job that he does. The passion that he talks about Iowa State, and the fact that we were recording with him and he was wearing the Iowa State, the fact that some random guy on Facebook sent him a message and said, "Hey, I run a podcast about Cyclone stuff. Would you come on?" And he was quick to do it. I mean, he answered me in like 15 minutes. That's pretty cool stuff. So he will always be revered, I think. And that was part of what I had told him when he came on. I said, do you ever buy a meal when you go back to Ames? I can't imagine that you ever have to buy your own meal, because he's just, I think he's a genuine article, right? He's not BSing you. He really loves that place. He's grateful for what he had, grateful for what he was able to do, and damn proud of the accomplishments that he did. And he should be.
I listened back to your interview with him. I every time I listen to him, I tear up because he's just his passion and love for the place is second to none. And I try to, as in my Cyclone fandom, I try to, I just want to be as half as passionate as that man. It just, he bleeds it and he believes it. And that's something that I'm so thankful that Matt Campbell has made it a priority to have Coach McCarty around. And I see the other day, TJ Ossenberger has also spent some time with him. And I know TJ and Dan McCarty have a close relationship as well. I figure that's a great transition into kind of talking about, as fans, what we expect from this upcoming football season. I was talking to my wife the other day, and I'm so excited to be back at Jack Trice and make that drive to Ames. It's something that I missed over this past year. I said it was going to be special because senior day is going to suck, because we have some young men that have changed our thought process as Iowa State fans. We're not sitting there anymore waiting for the kick in the stones. We expect some unimaginable things from that we couldn't imagine would happen, like winning a Fiesta Bowl. I'm kind of looking at, from my perspective, I'm looking at this season maybe the floor being a 9-3 and a possible ceiling maybe being 11-1 in the regular season. What are your expectations as a fan, or maybe you don't have any expectations?
Oh, I'm full of expectations. I fully expect us to be, without a doubt, undefeated going into Big 12 play. I worry about us stubbing our toe somewhere. We seem to have one game where it's a head scratcher and you think, I don't know what we're doing here, right? And that year that we lost to TCU, that was a few years ago. The Baylor game in 2019 down there, I mean, we should have won that game. The Texas game in 2017, I mean, that's another one where I was so hyped up for that game. I mean, partially, I just gotten out of the hospital that day and was home watching that game and my beloved Bears play the Packers that same night. I had two TVs going, and it was a double whammy that night. But I just think that we're beyond that now. I will be upset and angry if we have a game like that, I think. Whereas before, growing up a Cyclone fan, you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? And for me, this year, we can't have that, and I will be very angry if we have something like that. Like, I've given these guys enough chances now, and we are so loaded. There should be no excuses here. We should be going full bore every game without question. Our openers are always kind of scary. I don't know what it is that we don't seem to come out and just be on fire. I can't pinpoint what that is, but that worries me a little bit. But again, I'll be angry if we don't come out and, I mean, just put a whooping on you and I. On the flip side, it doesn't surprise me when we go down there and play Oklahoma to the nail. I mean, we've played them tight since Matt Campbell's been there. We've played them tight.
What do you were you able to attend games last season?
I was. I wore a mask, and I'm one of those guys that took COVID very seriously. But I told my wife, I said, we got to go. Like I've got to have some semblance of normalcy and to be able to watch this team. And even if it was in a partially packed stadium, we went every game that was there that we were able to. We felt completely safe. But I will tell you, that Oklahoma game, you wouldn't have known that there was a fraction of the fans there because it was so loud and it was such an electric atmosphere when we played Oklahoma.
I could feel the emotion, and just if like you said, it felt like there was over 60,000 people there. Just I could feel it through the TV. It was pretty special, even watching it on TV. I wish I could have been there last year. Like I said, I'm so ready for September 4th to be here. And I feel like we have, beyond this season, I feel like there's a great foundation for continued success. It might not be as high right away as it will be hopefully this coming season, but I definitely feel like, there's a foundation piece, and I really I contribute, and there's a correlation to how Bill Finley recruits, and I feel like how Matt Campbell is recruiting. They have a certain type of kid that they're looking for, and it's beyond the athletic aspect and talent. It's about culture pieces, and I know it's cliche and it's overdone, but I truly feel like Matt Campbell's, as the talent's grown, I feel like the type of kid he has not sacrificed any for a 5-star that might not fit the way he wants things run. I feel like he's continued to build a foundation very similar to Bill Finley. I feel like they have a type of kid that they want, and they're not going to compromise their values in recruiting.
Yeah, I agree with that. People call it cliche, but it's not necessarily cliche when it's true. I think he's a proven commodity when it comes to that, as far as the type of kid that he recruits, the type of program that he runs, the integrity and some of the intangibles. And I'll give you a good example. My stepsons, Josh and Jordan, which I've talked about on the podcast, have Williams syndrome, which is an intellectual disability. But they have been able to participate in Victory Day every year, which is a program that Coach Campbell puts on. He brings 60 or 70 special needs kids to the facility. They get paired up with a player. They get a tour the locker room, do all the practice stuff, all that kind of stuff. He gives them a pregame speech. They run out onto the tunnel. The cheerleaders are there. The band's there. The offense and defense is there, and they run a play and score a touchdown. And the fight song runs. I mean, it's a special thing for those kids. But what those players get out of it, there could be a lot of players there that are like, this is a pain in the ass, and I want to go to my dorm, or I want to go back to my house or whatever. But those players get so much out of it too, that the boys have been friends with Jamal Richardson, who was a cornerback there. Josh was buddies with Connor Sally. 1 year, and he still, as a matter of fact, Josh accidentally texted him yesterday. He meant to text his friend Connor and accidentally texted Connor Sally and asked Connor Sally if he could come up and go swimming. And Connor's like, I totally would, buddy, but I'm out of town, And Josh was like, oh, I accidentally texted, but he remembered who he was and didn't just blow him off or whatever. And those kids remember that, and Dan Sichterman, who was a defensive lineman there and moved to tight end, has been friends with Josh and Jordan. He showed up one day to watch him throw Special Olympics up there. So those types of guys and those types of kids aren't just giving it lip service, right? And those are the character guys that Campbell's bringing in, that I think is what's turned this program around. Brock Purdy's a perfect example. Look at that kid, All-American kid, Brees Hall, smart, kind, articulate. David Montgomery's another one. All those guys.
Before we, speaking of Brees Hall, what does Football Focus have against the guy?
They are purely trolling for clicks and for followers. At this point, it's got to be, let's see what we can do to piss them off today. It truly is. And Cyclone Nation will hammer them. I've done it too. This guy's got to be apparently all you got to do on Twitter to get, 10,000 followers is be a complete jackhole.
Yeah.
But
I have no explanation.
Just keep throwing the fuel on the fire, my friends. That's all I'm saying, because I think that guy's going to legit run over some people this year.
I absolutely agree. I think if he was in a Alabama or Oklahoma uniform last year, he would have been a Heisman candidate. He was technically, but I definitely it was a head scratcher what he meant to Iowa State and the program and what he did on the field. It's more than stats, like you said, and I definitely felt like he deserved a spot at the table. But once again, I think it gives him another more motivation to just continue the grind and be a better football player and better person this coming year. Before we leave football, I got to ask, there's a lot of talk about the college football playoff expanding here in a couple of years. What are your preferences? I know they're talking about moving the 12 team playoff, which allows more room for a team like Iowa State to make the playoff. But at the same time, I'm looking at I also look at player safety, and that's 17 games if you were to complete the whole season. I feel like that's too much. I'd prefer 8, but I can see 12. I'm not hard either way, but I'd prefer 8 over 12. What are your preferences?
Yeah, for me, it makes more sense to do 8 if you're doing the 5 Power 5 champs and then your 3 at large. But I think when you do that, you're cutting out those group of 5 colleges that had a legitimate claim for it last year, whether it's Cincinnati or Coastal Carolina and so on. What are you going to do? You're going to end up. I think the problem is if you have 8 and you bring those 5 champs, then you've got a round robin of whoever's left out of Georgia, Florida, and one other SEC team, LSU, that's going to rotate out of there. The SEC is going to monopolize those 3 extra spots. There's no doubt in my mind, because of just how good they are and the voting and so on. So I think by bringing 12, I think it gives a little bit more fairness to it, to some of those other teams that last year cried foul and said they had a legitimate shot at it. But the player safety is another concern that, as a fan, I would love it. And I think 4 is way too little. There's no doubt in my mind. They have to move away from 4 because you're cutting at least one conference champion out, and that's just not fair. Whether it's the Pac-12 and they're a lesser league or whatever, it all evolves and so on. If you remember, the Big 12 was not that great 7, 8, 9 years ago, and the Pac-10 had Oregon and was USC and so on, and had some of the best teams in the country. So I think the one that throws me for a loop a little bit is Notre Dame, because they're not going to have a first-round bye at all under this particular scenario. So does that force them to go to a conference? Probably not, because then that leaves them to have to play one less game. They won't have to play as many games, but who knows?
I definitely think I'm looking forward to the change. It brings more, like, just an example, the Oklahoma State Miami Bowl game, the Cheez-It Bowl, drew 3.2 million viewers. That's just an example. There's an interest and a want for a playoff. You could see 2 teams like that in the playoff, and it brings exciting matchups. I'm curious to see if they're doing home sites, how they want to go about that. I'd like to see if they're going to go through. I'd like to see the home site, but that brings, there's a lot of politics involved. There's a lot of athletic directors and coaches that have made great relationships with these bowl games, and these bowl games roll out the red carpet for football teams, especially in the bigger bowl games. So there's definitely that relationship with athletic directors and bowl game committees. So it's going to be interesting to see if these bowl games are going to give up their site and bring it to a home site. So, which I think for the home site, it's better for the fan experience, but we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out.
Although I was intrigued, I saw something floating around a couple of days ago about what last year's rankings would have brought. And, imagine having a first round playoff game in Jack Trice in late December, early January, and how fun that would be.
Maybe bring up somebody like that up to Ames during that time period. Definitely wouldn't be much fun for them. It would be a blast for us, though. Transitioning our conversation into basketball, I mentioned TJ Otzelberger. I worked a couple years when I was finishing up school during TJ's first stint under Greg McDermott. And I was super bummed when he didn't get the job 6 years ago. I knew TJ for a couple years, and he treated me with the utmost respect and always genuine. And I could tell at that time that he absolutely loved what he was doing. But I believe timing is a big part of our lives. And I felt like, for me personally, I was super on board, and I'm super excited for this opportunity for him. I think this is his dream job, and he truly means that. What are your thoughts on TJ? Unfortunately, things didn't work out for Steve Prohm. I wish the guy had nothing but the best. He's a first-class human being. It just didn't work out on the court, whether that was chemistry, whatnot. It was just the wheels had fallen off, and it was time for a change. And I feel like TJ's a great guy to pick that up. He's definitely shown the dividends already in the first couple months on the recruiting trail.
Well, twofold. I'll start with Coach Prohm. I didn't know. For me, I was a little afraid of bringing TJ on just because he wasn't that experienced, and I wasn't. I guess I had bigger, loftier goals in mind. We had that team coming in. I wanted somebody that was maybe a little more established that was going to come in and be able to take that team. But then when Prohm came on, I didn't really know who he was, so I kind of gave him a shot, and he was easy to like. But like anything else in life, if you don't do that job, eventually you're going to have to pay the price for that. And you could see progressively it was getting worse and worse. For me, I first noticed it when Livingston came back, and then he was benching Livingston and wasn't playing Livingston. He seemed like there was always at least one guy on the team that was in the doghouse, whether it was McKay or Lard or Livingston that one year. So it seemed like he was having a hard time with some of those guys and whatever. And I could just see the progression just start to fall down, even though he was bringing in these great recruits, Tucker, Halliburton. The other flip side for me for that is he had 2 first-round NBA players, and he couldn't win with them. That's a concern. So I was okay when he lost his job. I wasn't celebrating it like I found some people to do, which I found in bad taste. There's another guy out there that was like, well, he's got 5 million reasons to be happy. Well, as a man, if you have a job and you fail it, no amount of money is going to make me feel better that I didn't accomplish a goal that I set at. Not everything is about money. So, I felt bad because there's been plenty of times in my life I've tried something and failed and felt like crap, right? Regardless of whether or not I still had a job and a nice home or whatever. So, but Otzelberger, I think coming in now, I think he's got a little seasoning under his belt. And boy, he sure has recruited, right? He's won the offseason, I think, fairly well. Let's see how well he can coach these guys. I've got an open mind. I'm excited for the change. For the first time in a long time, I've thought about maybe wanting to buy season tickets for basketball. Part of that is because now the kids are older and my wife and I will have the opportunity to go during the middle of the week. Part of that is just the renewed me wanting to show the university that I support them by buying those season tickets for the move, because if they'd have kept Prohm, I would not have.
I definitely I feel like TJ brought him maybe we don't have the most talented, even though I feel like we've upgraded, and I feel like the median has grown higher. It might not have the ceiling that some of those players, especially the 2019 team that came up way too short, and it was really disappointing. But I feel like TJ has some grinders, some guys that are just going to bust their rear ends every day. And I feel like that's been missing, the guys that are able to just show up every day to work. And I feel like he's got some guys, Kauscher and kid from Penn State. I'm blanking on the name right now, but I think he's got some grinders. Then Caleb Grill coming back. I feel like he's got some more seasoning. I feel like you just have guys that are going to go to work every day. And I feel like that's been missing. I could be wrong. I'm not at practice, but from what I've seen over the last couple of years, it just seems like that's the type of guys that we've been missing. And we might not be able to shoot the rock as well, but I feel like we have guys that are going to show up every day, and that I think that will pay dividends for TJ in the long run when we add guys like Ellipsy and some other, and Eli King over the next couple of years. I feel like we're going to have some shooting coming in, and I just hope Tyrese Hunter is awesome, but I hope he's here for, selfishly, I hope he's here more than 1 year, because I think he'd benefit from 2 shooters we have coming in from high school next year.
I do too. I think he's got a good core coming in, and if they can gel and maybe put a few years together in a row, we could have something really special. I will say, I'd be remiss without mentioning it. I would like to think a pretty good friendship going on with Marcus Pfizer, and him and I have talked about how badly he would like to come back and help that team. Whether it's in, there's some rumblings of whether or not he could be an assistant or not because of not graduating and so on. But, the amount that he talks about what he could help with some of those big men and some of those big guys and just the mentality of playing, anytime that you could get somebody with his caliber that wants to come in and help teach and coach those kids, it just seems to me to be a missing opportunity for him. I would love to see Marcus come back in some kind of capacity or whatever, but who knows? And I will tell you, his 2 kids are legit prospects. Wouldn't it be nice to have one of those kids in there lighting up Hilton Magic too?
Yeah, Pfizer Jr. has really come on strong here. I believe he's entering his junior year of high school.
Yeah, he'll be a junior. Yeah,
so
and his oldest is in a junior college, playing over there as well. So.
I'm definitely on board with that. I love to see it. Is it just, do you think it's just a matter of completing school, relationships, connections, networking? What do you feel?
I don't know. I don't know for sure. I don't want to speculate anything that I don't know. I know that he has probably reached out, but and I'm sure he'll come back in some capacity, because I think TJ is going to do a good job of bringing some of those past players back in. Prom did a very good job about that. And I think that's important to the fan base and to the school, right? Paul Rhodes didn't do a lot of that. Matt Campbell does. He embraces some of that stuff. And I think that's good for the fan base and for the school as a whole. So I hope TJ continues to do that. We shall see.
We've mentioned some of the Cyclones that are in the NBA right now. I'm extremely proud. That is one thing that Prom did. We do have, and Fred can be credited, with the recruiting process of those guys in their first couple of years. And we're talking about the Niangs, the Monte Morrises, the Abdel Naders, the Halliburtons, the THT, Horton Tucker, and I think
Matt Thomas.
Matt Thomas, yep. I'm a big Denver Nuggets fan, so right now I got the game going on behind me, and I love what Monte Morris has done. I think he is a potential starter at some point in the next couple of years. He's really asserted himself. He's getting his shots continually got better as he's gotten over the last couple of years, and he's become more assertive. He had 21 points the other night, and he's had a 22-point game against the Blazers in the first round and a 28-point game. Is there anything? Do you still follow those guys? And I know my Nuggets are going to go down to the Suns, but I'm really excited about what the Jazz are doing, because they play team basketball. I'm just not into the big three. That's why I love my Nuggets. They have Jokic and Murray, but I'm like, it's more about drafting players, very similar to the Jazz, and the Suns have done the same thing. I really love that team over individual play, and that's why I'll be cheering for either the Suns or the Jazz in the finals.
It's gonna be really hard for me because I was a Suns fan for an odd reason. As a freshman in high school, I moved to Phoenix for a year, and Jeff Hornacek was playing there. So and it was the first NBA game I ever got to go to, and I got to watch them. So I kind of fell in love with the Phoenix Suns. And then when Barkley went there, I was a huge, Barkley fan when he went to the Suns and that finals team. So I'm probably rooting more for the Suns. But man, it's hard to watch Monte go down, and then to not be able to see Niang, and Niang is probably my favorite recent former player, as everybody is. And I was hoping that, but you have Abdel Nader there too, so I'll be okay. We're going to have at least one guy, I think, in the finals, and that'll be super exciting to watch. Would still love to see Deontay Burton. I thought for sure he was going to hang on with the Suns when he got traded with Nader, but I think he's floating around in the G League back again. So, but yeah, I'll probably watch more in the finals. It's hard to watch a lot of NBA basketball right now. It's just there's so many games and so on. Once we get to the finals, I'll probably tune in a little bit more, and I always check the box score on those guys every morning. So
Deontay is so athletic, but do you think he's not able to stick with the team because he's not really great at one single thing? Like, you look at Matt Thomas and George Niang, they perfected like George's 3-point game. I think he's shooting, I don't know, it's a credible percent. Like, most of his shots are coming from the 3-point line now, and he's done so well at perfecting that part of his game along with Matt Thomas. And you look at like Halliburton, he can handle the rock and he's a great passer, but you have to be really good at one particular thing to really find your niche and stick with a team. Do you think Deontay, even though he's super athletic and can do a lot of things, but just not great at one single thing?
Yeah, I think that's where he struggles. I mean, all of them can dunk like crazy and are athletic. But to your point, you got to have that one specialty, whether it's a defensive prowess or being able to rebound. Or I think the problem with Deontay is he's good in a lot of areas. He's not great at any one thing.
Well, there's a game I like to play, whether my guest is someone that talks about Iowa State, pro wrestling, whatever environment my guest is from. I like to play a Mount Rushmore game. And if you had to name your Mount Rushmore of Iowa State athletics, it can be coaches, players, personalities. Who would be on that Mount Rushmore?
Troy Davis would be on there. The man ran for 2,000 yards 2 years in a row on the worst teams I had ever seen in my entire life. Dan McCarty would be second. Because he took this team in this program where you never really thought it would be. I would have to say Marcus Fizer because, our first ever lottery pick and should have won the national championship. But, we got screwed by Michigan State. We could do a whole podcast on that. Bill Fennelly. I mean, for him to take the depths of where the women's program used to be and where it is now, and to credit what Coach McCarty said a couple weeks ago to me, I mean, he packs that gym and he packs that Hilton Coliseum for women's basketball with where it was before is he should have a statue, according to Dan McCarty. So anytime Dan McCarty says somebody should have a statue, they're on my Mount Rushmore. And I would say 5 is probably Seneca Wallace. Seneca Wallace was ahead of his time. If you could imagine somebody of Seneca's talents playing in today's spread offense type of game, I mean, what a talent that guy would be. He was Robert Griffin before Robert Griffin was a thing. I mean, he was phenomenal, and he brought me back into watching Iowa State football. I went to college there. I was a fan, but it kind of fell off, and I didn't go to games, and it wasn't appointment TV for me or whatever. And then when we got him and we had that string of him and then Blythe and then Meyer and so on, really dragged me back in as a fan and fell back in love with Iowa State football.
Looking at your years of fandom, do you have a favorite memory?
Probably the West Virginia game a few years ago. My daughter was a freshman up there. My wife and I met her in the middle of the field. So that's probably a special moment. But honestly, my favorite moment is when Josh and Jordan got to be on the field and score their touchdowns. And I took a bunch of pictures and somehow snapped an iconic picture of Josh celebrating his touchdown with David Montgomery. And it's my absolute all-time favorite memory and photo because it was a dream for those two boys to be able to do that. And so to me, that's probably my greatest memory is that.
Lots of great stuff, man. I want to end my conversation with you, and I'd like to end all the rest of my conversations with all my guests this way. And I want to ask you, what are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for my family. I always wanted to grow up, and the only thing I ever wanted to be was be a good dad and a good husband. And God has granted me a pretty special gift in my wife and my kids that I have. And that's what I'm thankful for is that, and God giving me another chance after cancer to be with them.
Man, I thank you for your time first and foremost, but just your openness and honesty. I definitely appreciate that. Where can our viewers and listeners of your podcast follow you on social media and the Tailgate Society and your podcast?
Yeah, they can follow tailgatesociety.com. We have all kinds of great content there and podcasts. You can follow Old Man Strength on Twitter. It's at strength_old. My Twitter is at SciGrad, you can find us on Facebook with the Old Man Strength podcast. And I think that's about it. So